Hi, everyone, and welcome back to 2030 Vision AI and the Future of Law, the podcast where we talk about developments in artificial intelligence and what they mean for lawyers and the legal profession. My name's Jen Leonard. I'm the founder of Creative Lawyers, and I'm thrilled, as always, to be joined by the phenomenal Bridget McCormack, President and CEO of the American Arbitration Association. Hi, Bridget.
Hi, Jen. It was so good to see so much of you in person last week that we're gonna have to figure out how to do that again. But
I know you must be sick of me. So
no, it was so much fun. We got to like hang out in many cities. It was awesome. Yeah.
we did that. We have to do that again soon.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you today because last week was a wild week in artificial intelligence and developments. And people who've listened to the podcast before know that we usually have a main topic after we go through some updates from the broader AI realm. And usually our main topic relates to something in the law, but there was so much that happened last week that we thought it might be overwhelming. It would be overwhelming for me, certainly, to cover all the developments and then do a main topic. So instead, we thought we would cover all of the AI developments that happened last week, or at least a summary of the major ones in our What Just Happened segment, and also frame it as sort of a message to lawyers, whether you're paying attention to AI or not. All of these developments are important in their own way, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of what makes them important. But for lawyers, all of these developments are coming your way as tools that you will soon be able to use in your practice and soon should be using in your practice if you agree with us that your ethical obligation will soon require that you figure out how to use these tools to benefit your clients and your work. But I think they're just really exciting developments and excited to dive into those. And before we do that, we will do what we do every episode, which is share our AI ahas, which are things that we've been using AI for in our day-to-day lives. So, Bridget, I'm going to toss it to you to share your AI aha.
I mean, as always, I use it for a lot of things. But I guess the one I thought might be worth sharing because it feels a little two steps forward, one step back to me, but I bet others have this same experience is I really feel like I don't have a great system for keeping track of all of the different things I'm working on, thinking about, writing, planning for, our business or this podcast or many other things that I'm working on. And I will read things, send them to you, you'll send things to me, you'll screenshot something. And I think like I really need to make sure that's available when I'm thinking about that talk for whatchamacallit on whatchamacallit. Or that should go in that, that essay that I have to write for, whatever I promised it for. And then usually it just stays on my phone or somewhere in an email box. So I decided finally, like, I had to work with ChatGPT. And I've done this before. I've asked about, like, systems for organizing um, research projects, all the different kind of parts of one's life. And I'll say in a minute what ChatGPT recommended with respect to like personal and professional. And I have tried a couple of the different tools, and I think you use Asana for your
Mhm.
project work, right? Yeah, and
Yeah, love Asana.
you're good at you guys like Asana. It seems to work well for you. Um, I because we I am a like at the AAA we are a Microsoft shop. We are at my I'm using Microsoft products. I have a ThinkPad. I really felt like it was important to like find a solution, a system that was going to integrate with the rest of my systems. Like it doesn't make sense to like find some other solution that then doesn't like talk to where all the rest of my information is. And so I asked ChatGPT to work with me like basically over the weekend to like think about what a system might look like. And it named it the Second Brain Project, Bridget's Second Brain. And and we've been iterating about, where to put what. There's basically a Microsoft product that you can access from any of your Microsoft tools. That's a it's a notebook, and ChatGPT has been helping me with how to organize it, to be able to think about where different things go. There was a while where ChatGPT wanted to see how I was doing, and it was like it gave me some code to copy into another program so that I could then like let it see my notebook. That didn't go so well. So we had a little bit 2 steps back, and I would say, like, I know I keep it open now all the time. I'm trying to, like, be good about using it. I feel like it's one of these things like any other habit that you have to, you literally just have to do it every day for some number of days. Like, I mean, what's his face? James Clear says 30 days. I think for me it's more like 90 days, but I'm on, like, day 4, so we'll see. But it's been actually pretty interesting when I instead of, me just getting frustrated and giving up, when I got frustrated, I go back to this one conversation, I keep track of my different conversations. Oh, by the way, I now have different ChatGPT tabs open so that I can be having lots of conversations at one time. I don't know if you're doing that as well, but that's making me uh, that's helping a lot. And I'll say like, "Look, this is really frustrating. I don't like this is what how you recommended I set this up, and now I don't know where this goes." And it's been very, very kind and helpful, and we're getting somewhere, I think. But I will say, it's definitely giving me like technical advice, but it's
Mhm.
been more of a like just like I needed, a smart assistant or, intern to come like help me like look at all this and talk me through it and see how to organize it. So it's really been more of a like strategic partner on how this like will work for my life. Oh, and the one thing I wanted to say was ChatGPT feels very strongly that I should not have separate notebooks for the things that I'm organizing, like, for my personal life, which I don't know why ChatGPT knows so much about my personal life because I don't think there's, like I don't have that much time to have very many projects in my personal life, but ChatGPT thinks that you should just have it all in one notebook, and it has advice for, where you can put that other stuff. It thinks that if you have to have, like, different systems, you won't keep up with it, like, it won't be as effective. So
Which is uh, I mean, from the times I've taken tutorials on, like, managing your life, that's consistent with expert advice, right?
totally. It's yeah, I mean, it's the bullet journal, like, theory too, right? Like, I
Yeah,
do my to-do lists don't separate, and
yeah.
that's the bullet journal theory, right? So anyway, I have some, like I don't ha they don't need much tending to because I don't really have that much time, but yeah. Anyway.
Um, but to go back to your point about you sort of need, like, a smart intern to come in now and help you figure out these tasks. This is something I keep thinking about. How do you think about that, like, execution step? Do you have strings on your ChatGPT like I do where you've asked
Yes.
it, like, a really cool thing and you get really excited and then you have to go do something and you never look at it again?
I do, but I yes, there are definitely things like that that I never look at again, but there are others that I do look at again. Like, I will go back and, get back into that conversation I was having when it's time for me to focus on that thing again. I can't help myself, like, sometimes I just, like I will say, "God, this is a great question for ChatGPT," and I'll get, like, a really good starting point, and it'll be more than a starting point, and then I'm like, "Well, I don't have all the time to, like, build it right now, so I'll go back to it." And sometimes I do go back to it, and sometimes I don't, but it did give me the foundation that I want. It's like a idea generator, right? Like, it's always an idea generator.
I mean, we've sort of, like, joked about we can't wait till there are humanoid robots that we can
Mhm.
infuse with Gen AI to go do these things, but I sort of have that wish all the time that I wish there were, like, some shadow version of me when I go off to do whatever I had to do that could just take the concept that ChatGPT spit out and
And do
execute on it and
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
Um, and I wonder if that's what the future of work looks like. It's like we've talked about this before, like, you just become a generalist at conducting different AIs and learning how to be facile with them in a way that helps you do a million things at your job versus just, like, this narrow set of tasks.
I I mean, it does seem like we're kind of heading there, like, I don't you don't use any Microsoft products, right? Do you
No.
I mean, the other thing I've started doing is, like, playing with Copilot more, like, as you know, I use mostly ChatGPT, I use Claude, I use Gemini, um, and and occasionally, if I'm on X, I use Grok to explain things that I don't understand, so I can just get the quick cultural references that I'm too old to understand. But I started playing with, like, the Microsoft Copilot just to see, like, well, what am I missing here? Like, again, I should be leaning in to my Microsoft tools since I have so many of them and so much information is stored across Microsoft products for me. And they have all these agents in Microsoft Copilot. And so I started, like, getting some of those agents. In fact, they have a monday.com agent, and monday.com is a program we use for project management. And so I was like, Yeah, connect to my stuff." So I'm trying to connect, like, through Microsoft's agents to see if that allows me to do what you just said. Like, I am off doing some presentation and my agents are continuing to work on that, thing that I have to do that I don't want to stay up late doing. But
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited as well. We don't use Microsoft, but we're a Google Workspace team. So I feel like the Gemini, it's funny how you're sort of gravitating toward the company that's releasing things that will be in your domain.
yeah.
So the Google announcements from last week, I'm excited to see like if they help us figure out ways to execute on those ideas. But then I do use ChatGPT, I would say 85% of the time.
And as does everybody else, by the way, including like every lawyer we now
Lawyers.
know, right? From like the
Yeah.
Law 360 surveys, like lawyers are using ChatGPT like 10 times more than even the legal AI tools, right? Like it's
Yeah.
stunning. Yeah.
And we're
All
gonna
right.
have an episode coming up about how you can be using those tools even if you're, at a firm that doesn't have, like, the fancy specific application tools and why it might even be better to use those tools.
Yeah. And we can even talk. Well, why are we talking about a future I was going to say, I have another idea for that future episode. Well, I'll get back to that
Where's
later.
our agent? Put it in your second
Seriously.
brain.
Where's my second brain when I need her?
I
That,
want you to get, like, a little hologram of a second brain next to you, and you just tell it, and it floats away.
oh my God. All right. What was your aha moment this past week?
So I'm like you, I use it all day, every day, and sometimes now I have a hard time remembering for our aha moments, and but one thing that you said that I now do is these multiple projects at one time,
Yeah.
and I feel sort of like Bond villainish in some ways, but also, like some sort of hero in an action movie at the same time because I'll open like, my kids are coming home from school, I know I'm gonna be gone because I have to make dinner, etcetera. So I have 3 or 4 either, like, reasoning questions or deep research
Oh
assignments, so
yeah.
I'll open them all up and it feels so cool to walk away and come back later, and I've got, like, a dossier on each thing that I've asked it for, I've got plans for things.
Yep.
So that is sort of a new development. I had not done a lot of that before. Or I was, like, in the car this morning, and I think it was getting ready for this podcast because I wanted to understand another podcast we're gonna talk about, and I had voice mode up in the car, and I was sort of, like, interacting with voice mode to get that working while I was going to do the other thing so that
Yeah.
when I came back to the car, it would, like, tell me what the results were. So just generally, like, orchestrating a lot of AIs at once, and then I told you we took my son who turned 10 to New York for, his birthday on Friday to a Broadway show, and I was really excited about it, and we bought Amtrak tickets, made dinner reservations, and bought tickets to a show. So I took screenshots of all 3 confirmations from my email and uploaded them to ChatGPT and just said, like, "Tell me the perfect way to sort of move through this experience, like, create an itinerary for me,
Yeah.
basically."
Yeah.
But it just read all of the pictures and then created an itinerary, but it also told me, like, what time I should leave my house in Philly to get to 30th Street to make the train, how much buffer time to build in because I'm taking 2 small kids, which I always forget to do, and then I'm, like, yelling at everybody because it takes twice as long. And then it
Yeah.
said, "Oh, this restaurant you're going to has a special, like, sparkler birthday song that they'll come out and like, make sure you tell
Oh,
them and they'll do
cool.
that for your son." And they did that, and so it was, like, really cool just to see it look at the visual information and turn it into a whole itinerary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, Project Spigot, oh my god, and then I took it to the nail salon with me. I asked it to tell me, like, the most popular OPI color. I've fully gone, like, jumped the shark with this ChatGPT. I asked it because I never get my nails done, and I said, "What are, like, the hot OPA nail colors for summer 2025?" Because I know there are a gazillion
Yeah.
blogs about it,
Yeah.
and it told me all the ones, it recommended one, and then it was so sad because I got to the nail salon and I realized for the first time that my eyesight's going and I couldn't read the name on the bottom of the bottle, so I'd done
Oh.
all this research, but then I was like, "I can't do anything with this," but yeah. I use it for things big and small and stupid and important.
It is so funny. I was, in an Uber this morning from LaGuardia to my office here in New York, and a friend of mine, who also lives in Michigan but was working in New York this week was on the same flight, so she hopped in my Lyft with me, and she's a lawyer, I'm not gonna say anything more else about her, but she has just started finally not fine she has started using it and is a little bit stunned by how incredibly helpful it is, like, in that way that when you first, like, experienced it, but, she's still in that, like, "Oh my god," like, you wouldn't believe it. She's telling me what she had to do. I was like, "Yeah, it can do that." And then she said, what I wonder if it knows, the restatements, from and you and I presented at ALI last week, and I was like, I don't know, but let's ask it." So I just pulled out I said, "Let's ask ChatGPT if it knows the restatements," and um, it didn't. It clearly doesn't it hasn't ingested them. I guess because they're paywalled, someone's gonna get around that, like, you can just buy them in or buy a Westlaw subscription, and I assume that'll be gotten around, but there's so much about them in so many other documents that it's ingested, that when we asked it a specific, question, we asked it a torts question and asked how the restatement would approach this defense, to an intentional tort, it it actually nailed it. An area that she and I both happen to know well enough that we knew it actually, got it right. So it's interesting, like, even when it hasn't read the original sources, it was doing that. I mean, we've seen that example many times, but she was funny. She was like, "Oh, it didn't even occur to me I thought I had to ask you." And I'm like, "Nope, you don't have to ask me anything anymore. You now have, like, a friend who's so much smarter than I am." Like, then when the Uber was stopped at one point, and there was, like, this graffiti on the bridge, and I no longer remember the words, but I can go into my search and find them, but she was like, "I wonder what that means." I'm like, "I don't know, let's take a photo and ask." Like, I took a photo. She was like, "You can just take a photo and ask?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was having so much fun, like, with anything she wanted to talk about. I was like, "I don't know, let's see what our friend says."
Did I tell you about when I was up with you in New York a couple weeks ago, and I went out to dinner by myself. I showed you the gigantic plate of pasta that I
Yeah,
thought
you
was
got
for
pasta
one.
for 10? You got pasta for 10.
Pasta for 10. And in the same dining experience, there was a couple next to me, they were, like, in their 20s, and the bartender came over and asked them what they wanted to drink, and, like, they obviously didn't speak English, so they were trying to he was asking them for their driver's license or their ID because they were so young,
Yeah.
and they didn't know what he was asking for, and then he sort of was asking them what language they spoke, and it was clear that they spoke French, and it was clear that nobody around them spoke French. So I pulled out ChatGPT and I said, like, "Ask in French, how can we see your ID so you can have a drink?" And I showed that to them, and they were like, "Oh, yes." And they got out their ID, and everybody around me was so delighted. They were just like, "Oh, that's incredible." He just translated. I was like, "Please have some of my pasta for 10
Yeah.
to celebrate with me."
I'm so glad you're here. I ordered pasta for all of us.
I knew this would happen eventually. I know, it is funny too when you do workshops with lawyers and they'll ask you questions, like, sort of like, "How did it know that?" Or, "Why did it go in that direction?" Or, "How do I get it to do something else?" And it's like you're saying with the woman in the cab, I'm like, "Don't ask me, ask the AI." And they're
Yeah.
sort of like, I could just ask it,
Yeah.
and they do. They're like, "Oh, it told me everything." But it's just that's like a weird way to interact with software.
And she hadn't seen O3 and its, like, reasoning work, and so
Oh,
she hadn't seen that before, so she was literally watching, like, everything it was doing to answer this torts question, and she was like, "This is unbelievable." Like, yeah.
the reasoning process in O3 or Gemini 2.5, it's just fun to watch. It
Yeah.
is like watching the smartest, most neurotic intern you've ever had just sort of like going off. It's like Tracy Flick in an AI. So we're
Yeah.
using it all the time. We're talking to people in taxis and at bars about it and and helping them understand they don't need us as the intermediaries. And so maybe that brings us to our what just happened because people that you and I interact with are stunned by what the models can already do. And then last week was just sort of like a fire hose of new announcements from all of the top tech companies. So do you want to kick us off maybe, Bridget, with some of the major announcements from Google?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we sort of had major announcements from just about every one of the frontier companies, so we'll go through each of them and make the what just happened sort of the main event. So Google had what I've been calling demo day. I don't know what IO is. I think that's what they call it, but I don't. But it's basically demo day. It's basically where they show off kind of what they've been working on and what's coming. And there were a number of. I mean, you could definitely do a full podcast just on what Google demoed and then the different reactions I've heard to it. But the integration that they're now offering, is, I think, a big part of what we learned. So, Gemini is now embedded within, and across the entire Google suite of services. And you know that you already know that probably if you're just even if you're not using any of these tools and you're Googling, you're seeing the AI summaries at the top of your Google searches. And if you do use Gemini, you can also go into Gemini and do a substitute for a search. But now they have, a third option, which is basically an all AI search within your Google search, I think. I mean, I haven't actually tried that yet. But they're also enhancing all of their other products, like their mixed reality glasses, with Gemini. Basically, it's Gemini forward is how I sort of understood it. Which I think you and I may have even had this conversation, maybe not on this podcast, but certainly, to each other, like that they have such an advantage in that they have so much of our lives. I mean, even though I just had this long riff about how my a lot of my information is across Microsoft, I have a personal Gmail account and therefore a personal, Gmail calendar. So Google has an awful lot of relevant information about me. And I have Google Docs because you and I work in Google Docs and I work in Google Docs with other people. So they have such rich data on individuals that um, tying it all together and having Gemini be sort of on their that they're on their like front foot with Gemini is I think a really smart move, and they had to do it. I mean, I know search is like most of their business, but search is going to be different, right? So they may as well like lead with Gemini and search. They also launched this video model that I've seen. I have not played with it, but I've seen lots of demos across social media, LinkedIn. I think Ethan Malik posted that you can no longer tell if a video is AI generated. Like this product is so good. And it produces videos with audio, although that doesn't always work, I'm told. Sometimes
Oh,
it's a little bit gibberishy. That it really is, that's something that I do spend some time thinking about, like how can judges and arbitrators, think through whether evidence is, you know, deep faked. And I worry about documents even more than video because we don't have that much video evidence in that many cases, but you could imagine it being, pretty convincing. And then there were lots of other like new tools that they've or old tools that they have just boosted their productivity and creativity, like Notebook LM. Um, I think you listen to Demis Hassabis on Hard Work? Oh, you did last week, didn't you? Did you?
I
Yeah.
did, and, I listened to a whole bunch of podcasts this week, obviously, but, a couple things they were talking about was, I guess, Sergey Brin made a cameo at the announcements that was
Yeah.
unexpected and sort of on stage live in front of the world told Demis Hassabis that they expect to be the leaders in AGI, um, ahead of all the other labs, and I think Demis's timeline has been, like, 5 to 10 years, which is much longer than a lot of the other researchers. So I guess he's now in it's kind of a tough spot to deliver there. But
Yeah.
I heard him interviewed on the Hard Fork podcast on Friday, and it made me it's not a perfect analogy, and I'm still sort of turning it over in my mind, but it made me think of access to justice because he was talking about how did you hear the interview on Friday?
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
When he talked about how early on, he was a firm believer in not releasing the models to the
Yeah.
general public, in keeping them in academia and where they were safe, and
Yeah.
he's changed his mind having seen what happened because he said, like, millions of smart people using it creatively, identifying its flaws, accelerate progress so much,
Yeah.
and it just made me think of all the conversations we've had and others about like, as lawyers, we feel this need to control everything and deliberate around everything for so long until
Yeah.
it's finally safe to release to the public. And I continue to believe that this is just such a democratized technology that there will be no controlling it.
Yeah.
And there will certainly be predators who will try to take advantage of people. But I mean, I keep thinking that teaching people how to use these tools well to serve their own needs is a better way to try to respond than to like apply this old framework of UPL or coming after the tech companies for people using ChatGPT. But I don't know. It just sparked that thought in my mind that if
Yeah.
Demis has changed his mind around it, like, maybe it's something for legal to think about.
I had the same thought. It's funny. I was thinking of it more in terms of, how unuser friendly I always found every avenue for legal research. And maybe it's because I'm not good at it. I don't know. But I had to do a lot of it for many years. Right, that was a like pretty important part of my job. And I just found it like the way information is organized in different legal formats didn't make sense to me, and I had the thought like, "Yeah, this is what we could" somebody starting from scratch could
Mhm.
really probably think about a better way to organize legal information that made it accessible and useful, to people who didn't go to law school, and I did
Yeah.
go to law school, but didn't help me a whole lot, so
Same.
yeah.
Same. I know. I had the same issue with legal research, and there's also sort of like a cultural thing. I remember as a litigator, like, if you were a Westlaw researcher, you were, like, a real lawyer because you could figure out all the head notes, and it had nothing to do with actually being able to master the law or figure out how it applied to your client, but it was sort of what you might expect culturally from lawyers to be
Yeah, yeah,
competitive even in that arena.
yeah.
So that was one thing that I thought of when I heard Demis talking about that. But I'm very excited as somebody who uses Google, and it's interesting to see. Like I've probably texted you about this observation. I don't know who had it, who was talking about how the great American tech companies of the last quarter century have gone from being innovators to really like trying to capture regulation to protect what they've had,
Yeah,
and I think it's fun to finally see some of these incumbent organizations figuring out their lane here and
yep.
being forced to innovate around it. So I thought that was cool.
Was there anything else about the, Google releases that I'm missing or that you're excited about as a
I mean, I think there were 100 different announcements. I think the thing that I liked about it, they're a big tech company, they're in it for profit, but that they're framing it as human first
they are.
technology.
Yeah.
And I like that framing because it's what we talk about all the time.
And it resonated actually with, with people who follow this even more than I do, and I feel like I follow it a lot, but everybody felt like, that theme felt genuine, like, they really do view it as kind of human enhancing, so yeah,
Mhm.
it was optimistic,
Yeah,
the Google Day, yeah.
definitely.
So there was also a new model released, from Anthropic, Claude for Opus, which, we knew was coming. We had heard that it was gonna be this, really tremendous coding model, which apparently it is. I still don't know how to code, but I really do feel like I wanna set some time aside this summer to try and figure out vibe coding. Like, I feel like if I not that I wanna build that many things myself, but I wanna know how to vibe code, because it
You gotta
feels
put
like
that in your second brain.
yeah, that is a second brain topic for sure. I don't and I'm figuring out how to go about it, but I do think it's, like, the kind of thing that you could dedicate some number of hours, like, over a few weeks and learn just to understand it better because it seems now like such an important part of the conversation. Who was it? Oh, it was we'll get to the DoorDash podcast in a moment, but one of the reasons I think we're seeing the models do, so well at coding and so well at, math and science is because the engineers who are building them, like that's what they're more interested in, right? There's not a bunch of like lawyers in the
Like,
lab, right? So
how do we
like
make it write a better brief?
But Claude 4 Opus is apparently, like, really excellent at complex tasks. It can maintain its performance over extended periods of time. It has deep reasoning, which we have already seen, obviously, from the OpenAI models and from the Google models. And it can do, really long running tasks, and it can enhance agents' capabilities. There was a bunch of, like, chatter about safety, like, there was some social media hubbub about how Claude 4 Opus, will turn you in if you're doing something immoral or illegal, or it wasn't clear exactly how it was defining immoral or illegal. and what exactly it meant about turning you in, like who was it turning you in to? But I think all of that was a little bit more talk than reality, although it sounds like there was some serious concern, and that might be why it took us longer to see this model from Anthropic than we saw similar models from the other labs, about how it was performing oversight for bad actors. And Anthropic has always been focused on safety, right? That's sort of been how that's the lane in a way. I mean, I think they have lots of lanes, but that's one lane that I feel like they've scoped out for themselves. So there's been some interesting conversation in many podcasts that you and I both listen to about, whether they were pushed to release it too early, or they took too long. And that's been kind of interesting to follow. But have you tried Claude 4 Opus yet?
Only briefly, like, not enough to really dig into what makes it different or special, but I found the conversation about the safety to be interesting because there are conflicting reports as to why Anthropic was formed, that it was formed, the public story is that it was formed to be more safe version of ChatGPT. And then there were interviews that came out later that said like they were just trying to develop different products faster and get them to market. And that tension seems to raise its head again and again of sort of on the one hand, it feels like their models are a little bit slow to catch up with ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
my perception has always been that that's because they're more careful about the release and it takes them a little bit longer even if they have the technology. But then I think these stories that are emerging from internal researchers are sort of suggesting that they are really being pulled to release things maybe before people are comfortable with it. And I imagine
Yeah.
internally, I mean, knowing absolutely nothing about the internal workings there, but it must be a difficult culture to lead if you've attracted people with the idea of developing safe AI, but you are under pressure to compete with this timeline because adoption is so important. And if people are already using something that's 3 months ahead of you, it's
Yeah.
hard to catch up. They do great research, I think. I
They
I think
do.
they have really great research reports.
Yeah, in fact, I feel like we learn more about how the models are behaving or why they're doing what they're doing from the Anthropic research team than any, maybe just because I haven't dug into. I'm sure there's really good research everywhere, but their research has broken through for me about, the kind of work they do to try and understand why the models are doing what they're doing. I think we're going to talk briefly about the Dwarkesh interview of Trenton Bricken and Sholto Douglas, who are two Anthropic researchers. And one of the interesting things they said on there, maybe you remember, I think they said like these AI systems are grown, not built. Do you remember that line? It was like I was like, "Oh god," and but it resonates because it's like, having grown some humans, like I've grown some humans, and I can't tell you why they do things differently. Like I fed them all the same, they had the same rules, they, had the same bedtime, they like all had to play music instruments, they had to do sports, they all had the same like, and yet like I've grown these, like, totally different humans, and if I had to try and figure out why this one thinks this way and that one, reasons a different way, it would be really hard for me to do, and that was such an interesting, like, way he put that. I don't know which one of them said it, but that they're grown, not built. I was like, "Ooh, wow."
Love that.
Yeah, super interesting.
Well, maybe why don't you, set up the Dwarkesh interview because you pinged me over the weekend that you were listening to it, and then I listened to it. It was super interesting.
Yeah, so I don't I listen to Dwarkesh's interviews whenever I can because I think he's so smart. And I will like I will say that whenever I listen to an interview that he's doing, I often have to stop, rewind, and listen to some things over and over again just to make sure I'm following it. But these two researchers from Anthropic, he had like a wide ranging conversation. I mean, I think it was a couple hours at least, maybe closer to three. Just not about. I mean, obviously they talked about Claude 4 Opus, and then also like where the world is going, like, and what, sort of what happens next. One of the most interesting parts of the interview was how would you advise a young person who was starting out a career, or even somebody who had started a career. Like, what do you do with those, like, sunk costs if this technology is gonna completely change the profession that you were headed into, right? And it was just a super interesting conversation, and those 2 are very, very smart, and I found them actually thoughtful. And there's this but there was the one thing that I think I texted you about or emailed you about or something was this, statement by Sholto Douglas. He said, "Even if algorithmic progress stalls out and we just never figure out how to keep progress going, the current suite of algorithms are sufficient to automate white collar work, provided you have enough of the right kinds of data. Compared to the TAM of salaries for all of those kinds of work, it is so trivially worthwhile." And I'm not saying, like, I'm surprised that even where we are right now, we could automate all white collar work. I mean, I'm building a second brain, and, a lot of people are I'm automating myself right out of a job today. But it but that the only the barrier is just, gathering the right data and then focusing on the different, like, tasks or jobs or functions that you want to automate. Like, that again, coding has come first because that's bringing so much um value, to engineers in labs, right? Like, the sooner they can train AIs to code, then they have teams of AIs, like, building faster, right? And getting faster to where they're all headed. But that just means, like, they haven't turned to law yet, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying they I don't know when they will, but that was pretty, a pretty stunning statement. You might have picked out other ones, but that one did stick with me.
No, it's kind of funny because I hadn't read your quote that you pulled out before we got on the podcast, and I think I pulled out the same insight from the same part of the conversation when they were talking about, "Could it do your taxes?" And they
Yeah,
were all, like,
that was hilarious.
laughing and
Yeah,
but could it do it by the end? I thought it was just so funny, like,
I know.
Dorkesh is just like, "But how about by the end of 2026?"
Yeah.
Because it's just, like, the most painful thing to do, so and it seems like something they should be able to do, right? Like, it's, like, just information that you're putting in.
Exactly, what they kept saying, like, "Yeah, I can do that as long as someone's interested enough to, like, make that the focus of their work," right? It's just like whether there's an engineer at some lab who's like, "Let's do taxes," you know?
But that's what made me so excited about the conversation because it feels like, on the one hand, we're in this weird moment where we were talking about this before we started recording. Like, you talk to so many people who aren't thinking about this at all, haven't tried a frontier model at all. But all the technology is sitting there now, ready to use. Like, if it never progressed beyond this, and it seemed to me like the bottleneck is just the number of humans to throw at all of these different challenges, and I think that's so cool. There's so much low-hanging fruit, and even you have this in cab rides. I'll talk to somebody at neighborhood pizza night, always lawyers, because 'cause I'm, like, surrounded by lawyers, and they're all stressed out about work and different parts of what they're doing, and I'm like, "Why don't you just build a GPT and upload, all the case documents to it and get your associate, that you just hired who's stressing you out up to speed?" And they're like, I have no idea what the words are coming out of your mouth, like, "Eat your pizza and stop talking to me about GPTs." But, like, I don't have the bandwidth to go in and do that, but it excites me that, like, it really is not that difficult to
Yeah.
do if you choose to do it, and we all have problems that we need to solve in our personal lives and society-wide, that I thought that was, like, a very exciting insight from them.
Yeah, I, totally agree, and I mean, I think if we haven't said this in recent episodes, I wanna say it again, like, if you're literally just starting today, you are, I don't know, a couple of weeks away from being, just about where anybody else is. You really can, like, catch up in no time, and be, like, where everybody else is and figuring out what the ways are that this can make a difference in your life, your practice, your work, so
And just to put a fine point on what we were saying before about people asking either of us just because 'cause we're, like, fanatics about using this, like, "Help me do this." You can log on to ChatGPT today and say, "I went to pizza night with this crazy woman in my neighborhood who keeps talking about GPTs for litigation. Like, what does that mean? and how would I build one? And it will tell you. And we'll go in a future podcast and talk about how to do that safely and ethically. But it's not difficult to just ask the AI for instructions on how to use it. The other thing I took out of that, which kind of relates to your these things are grown, not built a little bit, but and I'm putting words in their mouths. This is not how they said it because they used a lot of really cool lingo that I don't understand and they said it really quickly. But this idea that from as outsiders, we see all these slick product announcements and we're sort of like, why can't they get their act together? Why can't they develop a strategy? And they were sort of like inside these labs, it's, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of people just researching and trying to figure out what's possible,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit chaotic, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
not and that makes total sense to me, and it's a little bit unreasonable that on the outside, we're just sorta like, "Why can't Google figure out, like, how to integrate all this into what it has?" And they have, like, all 2 different labs that were blended into one, and then they're trying to work with people commercializing the technology, which is not what the researchers do. It's incredibly complex, and hearing them talk about it helped me have more empathy for what's happening inside with the researchers.
Yeah, and it helps to hear over the course of a number of conversations how they're not all sure, like, whether we're gonna need, like, another scaling law or, or whether we basically have everything we need right now to get to AGI. We just, like we said, need more humans focused on the different problems that they're less interested in the labs, or, it's sort of interesting. It's like being in the middle of, I don't know, when Henry Ford just decided to, like, put fire inside metal, right? I don't know, like, everyone was probably like, "What are you insane? Like, what's gonna happen with that? Why are you putting fire inside metal?" But, then, like, these amazing things are happening, and so, like, we're just, like, living in the middle of this revolution, right? This intelligence revolution, and we don't it'll be really interesting for you and I don't know, 10 years from now, to go back and, like, listen to this conversation and be like, "Oh, weren't we
Oh
cute?"
my god, we were so adorable. Oh
Yes.
my gosh. Eating all our pasta and talking to people in Ubers. It will be fun. I mean, it will really be like we talked about, like, Jane Pauley last time with, like, the World Wide Web and how mind blown we all were. But I think it was and this is sort of like a lesson in innovation theory and technique generally. I think it was the same Dwarkesh podcast because I feel like I was listening to it in snippets all
For a
weekend
long
long.
time. Yeah.
Um, but where they were talking about somebody I don't know who's, a famous coder, and they were saying, like, his hit rate of success is, like, 5%, like, almost nothing he does works, but he just does so many different things that he just has a higher probability of coming up with a new idea that does work,
Yeah.
and I guess, like, that's the other thing that stood out to me about that interview, now that we're talking about it, is at some point in the interview, they said something like, "There's this big blockade now." I don't know whether it was paywalls or something. And they were like, "But we'll solve for that."
Yeah.
And that to me was the exact flip of what I hear most lawyers' mindset be, which is, "We'll never solve for this. These hallucinations are baked in. It's all biased. Like, therefore, it's like, we might as well not even continue talking about it." And I thought the split screen of those 2 mindsets is so
Totally.
interesting.
So
Um,
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but this will be fun to talk about when we focus on, like, how lawyers and law firms that don't have enterprise solutions can think about how to use the technology. I've had a couple of conversations with smaller law firms recently, and they're really, focused on the latest hallucination stories.
Always.
It is what everyone is focused on lately. It's like we're having a hallucination surge of concern lately. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we could just sort of, like, channel the engineering vibe of, like, we'll solve
Yeah.
for that, and
Yeah.
when we do, here's all the amazing things that we can do, but we sort of don't even get to peek over that hilltop because we just wanna stay and it's our training, right? It's what we're trained to do, but, um or you'll talk to lawyers and you're doing presentations and they're like, "Make sure your story tells the story of hallucinations and
Yeah. Oh,
biases."
yeah.
Okay, if that
Yeah.
makes you feel better, I will do that.
Yep.
Um
Yeah.
so Microsoft also joined the chorus. They were early in the week, so they sort of got, drowned out by the end of the week. But what did Microsoft announce, Bridget?
So I think Microsoft basically announced that they want to excel at figuring out how to solve the problem that I care most about. So you might think they're boring. I love them for this, that they want to figure out how to connect the plumbing. Like all of their announcements were kind of around connecting your data and empowering you to be able to, scale solutions across the different places you store your data. So they announced these Copilot enhancements and these new AI agents. And as I told you, I've already started, exploring them and trying to figure out if I can get use. There's so many. I can only pick a couple a day. But I do like this effort from Microsoft to say, it doesn't matter how good the tech is if it's stuck in a little box over here and it can't work across the data that you have in all these different places. I'm summarizing, but I think that was the gist of Microsoft's announcements. Does that seem right to you?
Yeah, and like I tend to be hard on Microsoft for different reasons, but I one hope because you and I have both worked in government, and in my time in government, I found that well-meaning people who were working in the public interest would frequently sort of get bamboozled by people who were building, like, custom bespoke solutions that, serve only the residents of your city, and it
Yeah.
sounds amazing if you just don't have the experience to know that once you enter into that contract, you're with that vendor for the rest of your life, and it's gonna be costly to upgrade, and it's not gonna interact with anything.
Yeah.
I hope like, one of the biggest challenges in court systems and government systems and I know this is a more complicated issue because there's a lot of concern about connecting data across federal agencies, but there are places in local government where the problem in serving citizens is that the data do not talk to one another,
Yeah.
and it's so hard to fix that problem, and it's hard as a member of the public to understand, and it undermines the confidence we have in our government.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that Microsoft invest some of its resources into going in and helping the public interest, organizations figure out how to use this to unlock a lot of value for regular people.
That would be an enormous, like, contribution, honestly. I mean, we're seeing that up close in building some ODR solutions for trial courts in caseloads that online dispute resolution makes all the sense in the world, but the court data has to connect to any other court data, like, you need to know if there's any other open cases, and then it has to connect to Secretary of State data if it's a traffic product, and every one of those is so complicated, and I feel like if we could just solve for all of that, you could really produce some seamless experiences, both for court users and court staff, that everybody would be thrilled. So I don't know. I'm not saying like Microsoft's announcements last week tell me we're there, but I
No.
do like the focus on the plumbing. I'm really
Yeah.
into the plumbers right now.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right. So the most exciting announcement that I know, because you like were texting me about it on Saturday night, like when you might have been doing something else, was the OpenAI acqui-hire of Jony Ive. I watched the video. I watched the Sam and Johnny video. Did
Oh,
you?
the engagement video?
Yes.
I did not watch
They
it.
seem so happy. Yeah.
They do, I hope those kids make it. They do seem really, really happy
Yes.
together. I only saw the picture in the Times.
I watched the whole video. Yeah. I mean, it's only
What
like 12 minutes long, but so yeah.
was it cool?
I mean, I'm a sucker for this announcement, so, like, tell t tell our listeners what's happening, and then
Okay.
yeah.
So, Sam Altman, who is the head of OpenAI, announced a landmark partnership with, renowned designer Jony Ive by acquiring his hardware startup IO for $6.5 billion, which is the largest acquisition OpenAI has made to date. It's like it's just an enormous, acquisition. I think it's all stock, no cash deal. But the collaboration is really designed to develop AI native devices that are unobtrusive and really seamlessly integrate into our day-to-day lives and move us beyond traditional screens. And Ive is really famous for developing the most famous products at Apple, which of course are the most famously well-designed hardware in, probably our lifetime. Things like the iPhone that we all use today, and the idea is that they would figure out how to win the hardware race, especially at a time when Apple is not on this list, and Apple really seems to be falling behind, which is a shame because I thought Apple would be the winner, and I love Apple products. But I was most excited about this because I do, even as like a grumpy Gen Xer, I do feel like the technology that we have frequently feels cumbersome to engage with. We've talked about Elon Musk's creepy quote before that you always have to have your meat sticks, which is his adorable way of saying fingers, between what you want to do and the technology that you want to do it on. And I hate email so much, and I hate sitting down with a physical keyboard and a screen to get things done. So, I don't know what it'll look like, I don't know what it'll be, I don't think they know yet, but given his background and given that OpenAI really wants to design something totally revolutionary, I was really excited about this announcement. What did you think?
Yeah, I was too, which is why I actually went and listened to the whole video. And they both said, I mean, Sam Altman said really specifically, he said, I don't like that we now have this, magical intelligence available to all of us, but I have to open up my computer and then open up a browser and connect to the internet and like log into my account. And it's like 5 steps before I can do the thing that I just wanted to, I wanted to have a conversation about something and, it's so many steps. And even on your phone, you're pulling up the app, you're making sure you're logged in. And he was saying, I don't like my relationship with my technology right now. Like I don't like how much I'm in it all and opening
Mhm.
it and like, I'd rather be able to get the benefit of this new intelligence in some other way than this like bad relationship I've formed with my devices. And I definitely, I mean, I think you use voice mode this way, and I do think that's like one of the great um, use cases for the learning mode, which I do a lot with ChatGPT when I just want to learn about something, especially if I'm walking or driving. But I think it could be better. Like I've complained to you that I think my car's speaker or mic isn't great and, like, it will misinterpret me, and I don't like that, and say even with my AirPods sometime, like, I don't know, it's just, like, not hearing perfectly through my AirPods, and so I am ready for my Sam Altman, Jony Ive robot friend that, I don't know, is on my sweater or where I don't know where she's gonna be, but, like, on my hip like a little baby, like, what
I know, I have a picture of a tiny robot clinging to you.
just, like, right on my hip. Just
We're sort of designed to that see, like, if you were gonna do a design exercise, that's how we're designed to carry
yeah.
small people.
Right, exact right.
That won't be obtrusive at all when you go out to dinner with your
Yeah,
friends
well
and you all have a toddler-sized AI. Just start putting them under the table.
they definitely made it sound like it's not gonna be a phone, like, I don't know, I mean, I think they wouldn't commit to what it's gonna be, and they said, we'll learn next year,"
Yeah.
but it definitely sounds like it's gonna be some kind of wearable, I mean, it has to be a device, like, there has to be some place, some input, like, so you're either wearing it around your neck or, I don't know, wearing it on a pin, but
I have so anchored on Murder at the End of the World and the hologram Ray. Like, I just love that whole interface of just, "Hey, Ray," and Ray shows up, and then he just goes away.
I actually do think a hologram would be the best way to do it, but I don't I'm not sure that's well, I don't know. I'm not in the labs, so maybe
All ideas are good ideas
all
at this
ideas.
stage,
Oh,
Bridget.
you're right, all ideas.
This is
Yeah.
ideation stage. This was
Yeah.
it's just there was a lot to unpack,
Yeah,
and
we
so
kind of scratched the surface in a way, but, that I think the point is, like, things are moving really quickly, and now they're trying to figure out how to connect a lot of the parts of your life and your work life and your data, and this you and I have said this before, I do feel like lawyers and law firms are really much more in the game this year, in 2025 than maybe in previous years, but if you're not yet, like, please join us. There's too much good stuff ahead.
You're arriving at exactly the right moment. We played around with, like, the early stuff.
Yeah.
Now you can jump right in, and it's much, much better. So next time we'll talk about how to use some of these technologies if you are in a firm that doesn't have, firm sanctioned software, because there are lots of ways I think that you could be trying it out already, so that you're ready when you do have access to safer tools. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for breaking all this down, Bridget. This was a lot.
Yeah, this was fun. Great to see you.
You too. And we look forward to seeing everybody next time on the next episode of 2030 Vision AI and the Future of Law. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to 2030 Vision AI and the Future of Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Stay informed and inspired as we continue to explore the AI driven future of the legal profession. We'll see you next time.